So tell me, Jonathan, introduce yourself, like really about what was your story before you joined Vertical Motion? What was going on with you in your career?
Yeah, so my name's Jonathan Affalter. Before Vertical Motion, I had spent my entire professional career, 17 years, working in higher education, or higher education adjacent, primarily in like student activities, residence life, student affairs. And so I'd done that for 17 years, got my master's, did everything I was supposed to. But then I just kind of got to a point where I was just kind of really got tired of that kind of grind. It was a lot of putting hours, a lot of long hours, working 16, 17-hour days sometimes. And I think the thing that hit me is all of that time, effort, and energy for very little return for me personally, like financially. And it's like I always told people, don't get me wrong, yes, there were meaningful things outside of finances, like getting to mentor and see like teenagers kind of grow into successful adults. But then at some point, you also get to a point, it's like, well, when do I get to kind of like grow into as kind of a successful adult? Kind of felt like I was missing, like I was just kind of, it's like felt like I never left college. And then I also got to a point where it's just like higher ed is a very toxic and can be a very toxic field, very political. And I just kind of got tired of that. And it's like, do I really want to spend another 20 years in the field knowing that my next step would be up to, like a VP, like a dean of students or a VP role where I'm just going to be inundated with the politics daily, and they're going to expect me to spend, like $100,000 to go get a doctorate. It's like, do I really want to do all that for, $70,000 a year? It's like, no, not really. And so just kind of stumbled upon Tom one day on Instagram and got a message DM. And at first I'm like, all right, this is some bot. There's no way that this guy is messaging me. And then I eventually figured out, I go, no, he's actually legitimately the one messaging me. I'm like, wait a second.
Right,
this is
right.
this is odd. But then so I met with Tom and kind of liked what I heard. So then I had talked to my girlfriend, because the other thing that kind of prompted this, I had started a relationship with my girlfriend who I'm living with now. She always says surround yourself with people who are better than you, but I think what she really meant was just surround yourself with people who are going to challenge you and to
Yes.
kind of push you. And so I entered Vertical Motion because I was looking for something more. And at first, I liked the idea of being an executive, and I still do. But then that was when I realized, like, what I really want is I just want to get out of higher ed right now.
Right,
And then the executive part will come later. But like right
right.
now, I just want out of higher ed. I want to actually get back to enjoying doing things, finding enjoyment in my work. But I just was not enjoying work anymore with
Yeah.
what I was doing before in higher ed. So yeah, so I kind of found my way in. And I think a big thing with it was also, like, for me coming in, is that I had done some like coaching before, and I had some like during COVID. And I think the only reason I didn't find a ton of success there is because it was COVID. Nobody was hiring. And I enjoyed it and I thought it was good. But the thing that was hard for me, it was always like one on one with a coach. It wasn't like I wasn't really like surrounding myself with people. And the thing I liked about Vertical Motion was it operates much more as like a cohort. So like, yes, I learned from the course. Yes, I learned from like you, Tom, and Jackie and company. But I really learned a lot just from interacting with folks in the cohort. Like even my resume, getting it to where it is, it didn't necessarily, yeah, Jackie provided me a lot of feedback, and I think you did too. But like the cohort around me like helped me dramatically. Like they went through it. They were like, oh, this is a challenge we want to take on. And so they went through it, they dug through it, they gave me feedback. And so they felt like very much like a community. And so I think that was a big part for me that was really important, is that like community aspect.
Yeah. And if I could just put a fine point on that, Jonathan, I do all of the coaches, see people when they first come into the program. And like most of us, I think you kind of come in and, you're kind of quiet. You're kind of just like watching, seeing what's happening with the people, who's in the room. And I think with the membership and the way that you interacted, and definitely the way that Jackie connects people intentionally with other people that have either in the same industry, the same location, and sometimes the same outside interest, you actually do form some real relationships with people outside of the coaches that end up coaching each other. And so
Hmm.
people that are in your industry. So I have watched you really transform into kind of a different person, meaning really, and maybe that speaks to the leadership. What do people think about leaders, and what do leaders look like? What do leaders sound like? And sometimes we feel like, oh, it's the loudest person in the room. And for people that are introverts, that's just not who we are naturally, right? We lead in a very different way. And I know one of the things that we do, which is foundational to our work, is all of the assessments that we take. And you're Myers-Briggs, I believe you were an INTP. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
what I love what your girlfriend said, first of all, surround yourself with people that are better, whatever the word is, smarter, better in their own lane, right? You've got
Hmm.
equally something to contribute. But I 100% agree with her. Surround yourself with people that you can learn from. And so I'm happy to hear that that worked for you, and especially working for you as somebody who is not overly extroverted. I mean, I've watched you shift in the membership, and kind of people go to you, and we've connected people to you. So you've become a leader in your own right in a new environment. So that was really fun for me to watch. So I want to talk a little bit about going from higher education. And I've heard exactly the same thing. I do have friends and family who are in education. They all say the same thing. Now you're doing events. So talk about, how did that transition happen?
Yeah, so I think a big thing to me, it kind of goes back to my college experience. What kind of drew me to higher ed originally was that I was heavily involved in college. I was an athlete. I was on the track team all through college. I was in Greek life. I was in student activities. I was the president of our student activities council. And so, like, I was very big on the event planning and the community development on the campus. And so, like, and to the point that, like, actually later, eventually she was my supervisor in higher ed, but she had mentioned, she's like, oh yeah, the greatest thing about you was that, like, you were always the first one there and the last to leave. I
Mm,
never had to worry about the event. I knew I could show up whenever, and like you had it taken care of.
mm,
And I think a lot of it was I just had a lot of passion for events and connecting people and developing that community. And so when I got into higher ed, everything I did was very much around that largely. And so slowly, like, it started with just planning like community events. And then I was advisor for student activities councils, which, we'd bring like comedians and DJs and musicians to campus. And that slowly escalated to, as I moved up into bigger institutions, I, had the opportunity to start working with, bigger artists. So like I told folks, like I've booked artists, I had booked at the institution artists like Bowling for Soup or Tech Nine or, like Daniel Tosh or,
mm,
Dimitri Martin, Pete Davidson, all these kind of bigger, more household names, or at the time they were big household names.
right.
And I really enjoyed that side of it. And I always loved those events. And it's funny because like those big ones only happen like once or twice a year. But those were the ones I always look forward to the most
Right.
because it was just a lot of fun. And part of it, it's like it's a lot of stress, but I think part of it, the thing I liked was that it was always like solving a puzzle. Because like when you have these big artists, there's like you have to have more security, you have to have the production. There's limited financial resources, so you got to figure out how to best use those. And so it was always kind of like solving a puzzle to an extent, which I think looking back on like those personality tests, it makes a lot of sense because like my authentic self is a craftsman on
Mhm.
the culture index. And so it's like that's kind of what craftsmen I think tend to enjoy is like that problem solving or looking at those details.
Right.
And so looking at that, like I started to realize as I kind of went through vertical motion, it took me some time to realize this. I think it took me about 3.5, 4 months because I didn't really say much at first. And then all of a sudden one day I was like, oh yeah, I've worked with Drake before. And someone's like, wait, hold on, what? And
Yeah,
so
like these little pieces
they're
of, like,
like,
I'm sorry, what did you say?
yeah, so it was like, wait, let's back that one
Pick
up
that
and
up.
let's talk about that. So then I realized it's like, no, I really enjoy that side of things. And so it's like I want to work in either entertainment or like live events or something. And so then once I realized that, I started building my resume around that and I started focusing on that aspect and really kind of honing in, what do I need to do? Who do I need to connect with? And so then I kind of became fearless there for a while once I kind of realized that, because like
Yeah.
just on LinkedIn, I was just like finding people and be like, hey, just like, hey, here's who I am. And I wasn't afraid to be like, yeah, I work in higher ed. I was like, hey, I've worked with artists like this. I really enjoy what you do. especially like people
Mm,
like Live Nation, be like, I love what you all do. I love
right.
the shows that you put on. I go to them all the time.
Yeah.
And so just making connections, and then slowly but surely I built up that. But then more importantly, I reached out to people who I had actually worked with in the past, one of whom used to work for one of the production companies that I used to work with to bring in for concerts to help, run the production, the light, sound, and everything. And so I reached out to him and just told him what was going on. And he's like, why don't we set up a 30-minute meeting? So then we met, and then we talked, and he's like, well, if you need connections with anybody, tell me, because he's like well connected in St. Louis. And he's like, yo, you should go check out Shafitz. He's like, I'm really good friends with the GM there. He's like, Kramer's my guy. So randomly went on LinkedIn, looked up this Kramer fellow, and then I saw that he had posted like 2 days before about a senior marketing manager at the arena. So I'm like, well, here's my shot. So, I kind of took it. I had sent him a private message. He didn't message back. Next thing I know, though, the assistant GM, who's now my supervisor, was looking at my profile, and they were setting up an interview within a few days to have me to do the whole interview process. And so, I kind of worked through that 3 interviews, with one with the assistant GM, one with him and the GM, and then one with in person with the whole team.
Yeah.
And, next thing I know, it's like they're making me an offer.
So many things that I'm thinking. Did it, and you tell me if I'm wrong. I believe that we get into our lane. You chose, and a great thing to choose for sure is, higher education, academia, and it worked, and it was great. But what I do find with a lot of people that show up, they have this, you show up for a specific reason, and it is usually executive presence. How do I present better? What are you? How do I do that better? What does that even look like? And then you go back to that foundational work, the ikigai, right? And you think like, well, when was I most alive, right? When was I excited? When was I most successful? Where was I thriving? And you go back to whatever that time was and whatever that passion was, and you take a bit of that, and it's like, is that possible again? Can I incorporate that piece of me and that type of work into what I'm doing today? And then you surround yourself with people who are part of different networks. And that is the other thing, too. Everybody here is part of a different type of network, whether it's legal, whether it's IT, whether it's name whatever. And then suddenly you get momentum. It's like, I'm going to reach out. I'm going to actually pursue this. I'm going to start to do the things that might get me into that industry that I really want to be in, where I was really, really good. I'm really good at that. So that is a difficult shift, Jonathan, that a lot of people cannot figure out how to do. So kudos to you. That is such a big deal. And I'm very happy that Vertical Motion and all of the members were able to spark that action that just got you on fire. I remember that. It's like there was a whole different energy about you. So yeah, very inspiring. Very, very inspiring. So, in terms of where you are today, are you good? Are you thriving in your work?
Yeah, so I think with where I'm at today, I do feel like I'm finding success. I think the thing for me, there was an adjustment period. And I think part of
Mm.
that's just like I was going from higher ed, which quite frankly, as an industry, it moves at the speed of smell. Like they're still doing things the way they were doing it. Like the
Right.
example I always use is like the generation in college now is Gen Z, and
Yeah.
they're preparing for Gen Alpha in a few years, but like they were still doing things the way they were when millennials first started coming into college. And so it's like,
Mhm.
they move very slow. You have a lot of committees just to discuss forming a committee, and then it's just like all of that. Too, I had to move and adjust to a very fast-paced environment, and I think at first that was kind of a struggle. And
Of course. Yeah.
it's weird because like my frustration with higher ed is how slow they moved, and I always want to move fast. But then now I'm in one where it moves fast, and it's like, oh, wait a second, I need to adjust to this. And
You
so
got
I
what
did.
you asked for.
Yeah. And so I had to kind of, take a step back and be reflective at a few points, because like at times I was actually rushing, and then my work wasn't as good. And it was like, and I'm like the type of person who I take that kind of thing very personally, like when I feel like my work's not up to par. And so I was kind of beating myself up there. But that being said, one, I realized that I was doing that, because even my supervisor, he's like, you're fine. He's like, you're good.
Yeah.
But like I also realized I was doing some very, very, very good things. Like one of the very first shows that, for example, part of my job is like we always like to make sure it's about the fan experience, but also it's about honestly artist and tour experience,
Mm.
because we want to make sure these artists and these tours want to come back to our venue. And so like one of the very first shows I had to do, I was tasked with actually doing that with was Parker McCollum. And then one of the things that we do, sometimes we do like an artist gift. And so I had sourced a custom Carhartt jacket with his like tour logo and everything on the back, his name on it. And the crazy thing was, is like literally my first show, they gave me the full reins to do this kind of stuff on. He loved it so much, he ended up wearing it on stage, which is like something that's like
Oh,
crazy.
that is so awesome.
And then like he did a shout out on stage about it too, so like there's a video of it.
That is fantastic.
But it like went so wild. Like my supervisor was like, dude, this is crazy, this is the greatest thing ever. But then it ended up making its way up to the vice president of marketing at the company I work for, because like they passed it up the chain. So it was kind of funny because like it just literally within my first 3 months my name was already working its way up to VPs.
Man, oh man, that is fantastic. So many things. So you are now in a position where you are able to, you are being given permission to, or maybe not, maybe you're just taking it to be creative. And then
Hmm.
you're getting affirmed for your creativity and you are thriving. That is fantastic. I have this belief that there are so many people out there that are good at their jobs. They're good at their jobs, they're efficient, they have a fantastic work ethic, but they don't really like it. Imagine, just imagine if you found that space, if you found that work, if you found those people where you absolutely thrive, how much better could you be? How much happier? How much more balanced could you be? So I feel like you did it. I mean, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. So, top two things. What are the top two things that vertical motion gave you, that has enabled you, that has sparked you to move into this new season of life and this new type of work?
I think a big thing for me, it's two. I think one, it's confidence, because I think a lot of times, like I said, I've tried before, and it wasn't that I wasn't confident. It's just that it's really hard sometimes to keep going when you feel like you're doing it on your own. And I think with
Mhm.
vertical motion, kind of going back to the community aspect, there's a whole community kind of cheering you on and helping you along the way. And so like that, I think that's a big thing that helps build that confidence up. But then also it helps with the confidence because obviously, while obviously no one's intended to do vertical motion forever, the reality is like as it sits right now, you're not just booted out the second you kind of get where you're trying to go. It's like you still have a little bit of time after you start that position or whatever to kind of
Right.
still engage with the community, still kind of maybe learn some things and still kind of maintain that confidence there while you adjust to that new environment or that new position. Or new industry for in my case. So I think that was a big one. And I think another one would honestly just be, I think, is like helping me realize to like kind of be more like authentic. Because I think for me, and it was funny because like when I did the culture index, one of the first things Tom noticed, he's like, you are a wildly different person at work than you are at home. And it's because like my culture index was like, it's like, there's always standard points of deviation for everybody at work and at home. For me,
Sure.
I was like wildly on one other side of the spectrum when I was at
Yeah.
work. And so it's like I was essentially felt like I was pretending to be another person. And whereas now
Mm,
it's like, no, I can just be myself.
yeah.
And here's how I can be myself and be
Yeah.
successful in the
Yeah.
workplace.
And that is such an indicator. So the culture index being one of the assessments that we take when we see that those your behavior at work versus your behavior, like who you naturally are, is there. If there is a vast delta between the two, there is a stretch. There is a battery drain that you can do for a while, but eventually that is going to wear you out. So for those of you who are someone completely different at home versus at work, how sustainable is that? That's exhausting. When you come home and you're exhausted, that's what that's all about. I will say too that Jonathan, you will go on to do amazing things. You will go on to build your career, but once you've left vertical motion, you and I will always be connected on LinkedIn. So you'll always
Yeah.
know how to get a, not just me, but everybody that's in the cohort. You have a whole new network of people. Advisory board, if you will, that if you ever wanted to kind of reach out to. And I really hope that you stay in contact with everybody here, because you also have proven time and time again that you have a lot of insights to offer, a lot of things to say that bear saying. So I do, want to remind you that we'll all always be connected.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation. I really am inspired by the growth that I've seen in you. And I'm really glad that I got to learn a little bit in more detail, like what you do with the events. I knew it was events, and that was exciting to me, but to the extent that you do and the people that you work with, it's impressive. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.